City Club Forum, which we are recording and which features a debate between the two candidates for the District 4 seat on the Montana Public Service Commission. Welcome, Jennifer and Monica, and thank you for being with us today. Thanks also to the University of Montana's Alex Karklins, without whom we simply could not do these Zoom forums. This event will be videotaped by Missoula Community Access Television as part of its media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves the Missoula area on cable channels 189 and 190. You can also find videos of our past forums by clicking on the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and free exchange of thought. We have a deep and abiding commitment to civility and civil discourse, which I will talk more about in a minute. First, I want to thank our sponsors, including our executive level sponsor, the University of Montana, for this super duper Zoom platform. Other executive level sponsors, Blackfoot, First Security Bank. We also like to highlight other sponsors every month. So today we want to recognize Missoula County and a few of our nonprofit sponsors, the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, Glacier Country Tourism, and the Missoula Downtown Association. We are grateful to our very diverse group of sponsors for sticking with us here in the new abnormal of our Zoom format. And we appreciate our sponsors' dedication to civil discourse around community issues. I also want to thank the City Club Board of Directors, our tireless administrator, Eric Legvold, and our moderator, Ray Eckness, who has previously filled this role so capably for us. And again, thank you, panelists. Before I turn it over to Ray, just a quick reminder about our commitment to civility and civil discourse and our expectations of all of you today. I've said in the past that I know I sound like Mary Poppins when I talk about standards of behavior. It sounds especially quaint during an election season when we are bombarded by what feels like nonstop negativity. But at City Club, we try to listen to each other and even to try to find common ground with each other. Ordinarily, when we meet in person, we do this by sitting around the same table and through table talk, where each table comes up with a question for the panel. We can't connect that same way via Zoom, of course, which is too bad because we lose something when we are not required to engage in person with the people, with even people we might disagree with profoundly. But we encourage you to stay civil and brief in your comments in the Q&A. If you are insulting or profane, we do reserve the right to remove you from the forum. You are certainly free to engage in that behavior elsewhere, just not here with us. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Ray Eckness. Ray has done this for us before. He directs the Broadcast Media Center at the University of Montana, overseeing both Montana Public Radio and the Missoula arm of Montana Public Broadcasting System. So thanks very much, Ray.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for being here today and supporting City Club Missoula. 2020 is a critical election year for the Montana Public Service Commission. That 5-member PSC is one of the smallest but most powerful state agencies responsible for regulating energy, telecommunications, water, sewer, transportation, and pipeline utilities across our state. Commissioners are elected to 4-year terms representing one of 5 geographic districts of Montana, and 3 of those districts have openings this year. And we're happy to have the 2 candidates who are vying to serve District 4, and District 4 encompasses parts of western Montana, including Lincoln, Sanders, Mineral, Missoula, Powell, Granite, and Ravalli counties. We'll meet the candidates, Jennifer Fielder and Monica Trinnell, in just a moment, as we hope to learn about the PSC's functions and how each candidate stands on the issues facing the commission. But we thought it might be first nice to learn a little bit about the PSC and the background and more of what they do. So to give us some background is Shane St. Ange, who has lived in Missoula for the past 9 years while obtaining a bachelor's degree in political science, a master's degree in public administration, and is finishing up his final year of law school. He has continued to work in the public sector, including stints with the Missoula County Commissioner's Office and the University of Montana, where he is currently a data visualization specialist. He's been a Big Sky Poll Fellow, as well as a fellow with the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education in the Office of Academic Research and Student Affairs. He's had the opportunity to be an inaugural Baucus leader and had a summer internship in Washington, D.C. on the United States Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So Shane, give us a little bit of background of the PSC.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to try to be brief so that we can get to our candidates. So I'll just get right at it. So there are certain enterprises that are so intimately bound with public welfare and so affected by public interest that they are practically quasi-public enterprises. Chief among these are utilities and common carriers. They are granted by the government the security of assured markets, freedom from competition, and even the right of eminent domain in some respects. But in turn, this unique type of business is subject to restraint. While the ordinary enterprise is entitled to seek maximum profits, a public utility may not. Its special status obligates it to profit, which is fair and reasonable. So in the late 19th century, there was growing feeling that there was a need of supervisory bodies to have power to create and enforce its own rules in states in order to control the operations of public utilities and common carriers. The first state to create one of these commissions was the state of Illinois. A couple years later, in 1876, the United States Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of these commissions, and then years following that, more and more states started to create these commissions. In 1913, the first commission of this type was created in Montana with the Montana Railroad Commission, and this is what would soon, in the years that followed, would become the PSC, or the Public Service Commission, in the state of Montana. In 1974, that body was expanded to have 5 members. As Ray said, these members are elected from 5 different districts in the state of Montana. Here in Missoula County, we are in District 4. And so the counties are defined in the Montana Code annotated in Title 69. And in District 4, we have Granite County, Lincoln County, Mineral, Missoula, Powell, Ravalli, and Sanders. There are term limits for PSC commissioners, and that is determined by when those people are applying to be on the ballot. It is asked if they have had 8 or more years on the Public Service Commission in the last 16 years. The Public Service Commission is pretty much the head of the Department of Public Service Regulation. That department has about 30 or more staff members, and these include economists, engineers, attorneys, rate analysts, and other workers. That department is divided into 3 divisions, which are the regulatory, legal, and centralized services. According to the mission of the PSC, the agency works to fairly balance the long-term interests of Montana utility and transportation companies and the customers that they serve. So what is the role of the PSC? They regulate common carriers. These carriers include carriers of passengers, carriers of messages, and carriers of property. They ensure that none of these carriers give preference to anyone besides the United States government or the state of Montana. They also regulate utilities. A public utility includes any corporation, whether public or private, that operates or controls any plant or equipment, or any part of plant or equipment. It's all described in Title 69 of the MCA. But these utilities include heat, street railway service, light, power in any form by any agency, And there are some exclusions, which are like rural cooperatives, municipal or county controlled utilities. And yeah, the commission does have power to adopt reasonable and proper rules in all inspections, tests, and audits in investigation of these utilities. That is one of their primary roles. And they also regulate the mode and manner of all these investigations. A big part of the PSC is how they set the rates for these utilities. If you look at the PSC's website, they liken this process to how a bank gives out a loan. So what they look at is they analyze the company's financial statements for accuracy, examine its operating practices to ensure efficiency, and review known future events that may affect the business. So by law, as I said earlier, they limit these profits for utilities to what is just and reasonable. So the PSC must allow utilities an opportunity to earn just enough profits so that the utility owners have an incentive to provide adequate services to their customers. If you want to look at more information about the PSC, I suggest you look under Montana Code Annotated under Title 69 or in the Administrative Rules of Montana under Chapter 38. I think I kind of just gave a broad view. I'm not going to go into any modern issues, and I'll kind of leave that for the candidates to discuss.
Thanks, Shane. We really appreciate that background, and kind of sets the field for our candidates. So now we will meet our candidates, and we'll start with opening statements. Up first, we will start with Jennifer Fielder. Jennifer lives in beautiful Mountain Valley near Thompson Falls with her husband, Paul, who's a retired wildlife biologist. They and their 2 kids and 5 grandkids love to spend time outdoors. Fielder was elected to the Montana State Senate in 2012 and again in 2016, and has received awards for protecting Montana's outdoor heritage and for defending the rights of people. Her 8 years as a Montana lawmaker followed 2 decades of business ownership and professional experience related to PSC-regulated industries such as pipelines, railways, electrical transmission lines, hydroelectric power plants, telecommunications, sanitation, transportation, and federal energy regulatory proceedings. She acquired diverse public policy experience as chair of the Legislative Council on River Governance, chair of the Senate Fish and Game Committee, vice chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. She also served on Montana's Environmental Quality Council, the Senate Natural Resources Committee, Water Policy Interim Committee, State Tribal Relations Committee, and the Legislative Consumer Committee. In addition, Fielder has led national organizations and managed complex legal and multi-million-dollar financial portfolios. Jennifer, your opening statement up to 10 minutes. Thanks for being here. Jennifer, if you just unmute there, click for us, and then we can go.
There we go. Okay. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with the City Club Missoula. I am really thrilled about the format and the fact that your club, your organization encourages an open exchange of ideas, because that is something that I think is really being lost in today's political climate. We can have, and we deserve to have, a fair exchange of ideas without shouting each other down and calling each other names and that kind of thing. So thank you so much to City Club for doing this. So yes, my name is Jennifer Fielder, and I am a current state senator representing District 7, which includes all of Sanders County, Mineral County, and a little bit of Missoula County and Flathead County. And as you mentioned, my whole family, we are avid outdoor enthusiasts. In fact, I actually began my career as a professional ski instructor. I paid my way through college as a ski instructor and ski coach. I coached a national collegiate ski team in Colorado, and it was a great way to help pay my way through school. I did earn an associate in applied sciences, as well as an associate in arts and sciences and a bachelor of sciences degree, and was able to graduate with honors. And my internship was actually my first real experience in the energy realm. And I did an internship for Chelan County Public Utility District, which is a hydroelectric facility company. It's actually owned by the public, and they've got 5 major hydroelectric projects that provide power for not just the state of Washington, but throughout the country. I was actually classified as an engineering student with the Chelan County Public Utility District. I learned an awful lot about how the energy is produced, how it's distributed, the regulations that are required that they must comply with, and the finance involved with it, and as well as some of the mitigation, a great deal of the mitigation work that the agency did in order to offset the impacts that it had. So that was a great place to start my career related to energy issues. And it's been kind of fun to draw back on those experiences and that network of professional people, some of which I still maintain relationships with. After my college internship, I actually worked in local government, in parks and public works. I managed planning and environmental review. I was coordinator for a solid waste advisory council for a regional advisory commission. And I worked quite a bit on infrastructure development and financial procurement for public works projects. And at about 3 years after I graduated college, at the age 26, I was still working for county government, but I started my own planning and design company and project management company. There were other municipalities that wanted my services, and I got the blessings of my county government to go ahead and start my own business and start contracting out some of my services in addition to working for the county. So I was a pretty busy person because I was working full time for the county. They actually loaned me out to other county departments, and I was getting about 60 hours a week in the county, plus running my own business, trying to help other municipalities with their projects as well. That's how my business really got started. And I actually operated that company for about 2 decades. It morphed into different things. It started out as JAO planning and project management, and became JAO project coordination, and then became Silverline Projects, which actually added a construction division, because what I saw was some projects that we were designing and managing and financing were not being put in the way that I would like to see them. So I started a construction division so we could actually oversee the construction and installation of these projects so they were done correctly. Through that career, I actually had projects that interfaced quite often with the types of industries that the Public Service Commission regulates. We dealt with railways, we dealt with pipelines, energy, telecommunications, sanitation, transportation, and quite a bit of work in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission process, where I was a consultant helping local stakeholders navigate that process. So in 2012, I decided to run for office, and I was elected, and have served in the state Senate ever since. I still am in the state Senate. I will finish up my final term at the end of this year. Due to term limits, I can't run again, and that's okay. I actually wasn't planning to run for anything, but I had a number of people that appreciated the efforts that I made in public service and asked me to stay involved in some way. And I had actually considered the Public Service Commission in the past, and I took a good close look at it. I spoke with my family about it. I actually prayed quite a bit about it. And on the final day of the final filing deadline, I decided to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring. And that's what I've done. A couple things I'm kind of proud of as a legislator. I was given some awards for defending our rights and freedoms, and also for the work I've done to protect our outdoor heritage. And, I think those are the types of things that demonstrate that I'm very well connected with the people. As an elected official, I've been probably one of the most accessible elected officials that many people have ever experienced. I give out my phone number freely. It's published on all of my material. People call me and can talk to me. Sometimes I get calls and people call and say, oh, I wasn't expecting you to answer the phone. They thought I'd have some staff. I don't have a staff. It's me. I do the work. I'm very hands-on in everything I do. I write my own legislation and I answer my own phone calls. I also respond to the emails and the letters in person too. So sometimes I don't get back to people because I don't have it. I hate form letters. I hate it when politicians send form letters to people. So I won't do that. I will answer personally, and I do my best to keep up with that. So I think the 8 years as a lawmaker gave me some broad policy experience and helped me understand the role of an elected official in connecting with and representing the people very, very well. My past experience and professional experience seemed like a very good fit for the Public Service Commission. So to me, it wasn't a matter of whether I could do it. It was a matter of whether or not I was willing to commit the time to it, because I understand it is a very time consuming and demanding role. And as I said, after a lot of consideration, I ended up deciding to go ahead and do it. I am willing to do this job well. I'm willing to do it full time. I don't take the responsibility lightly. And I definitely didn't enter it for the paycheck. I've seen a number of people, I think, that have filed for this office and other offices with the paycheck being the primary focus. That is not my focus. I've actually given half of my legislative salary away to charitable causes, and I do plan to give a substantial portion of my Public Service Commission salary away as well. The reasons that I want to do this job are, number one, to bring professionalism, objectivity, and integrity to the Public Service Commission so we can make fact-based, wise decisions for the betterment of our state. And my goals, my four main goals for this are to ensure that we have sustainable, reliable, low-cost energy, that we have safe communities, that we can have a healthy environment, and a strong economy. And I believe we can have all four of those things if we do our job well, and if our core principles keep those goals in mind. And I definitely will. Those are definitely my goals. Thank you. Integrity matters to me. Every single person that I represent matters to me. Every person in the district, every person in the state of Montana, in fact, every person in this world matters to me. Our children matter, our future generations matter, and our present generation matters. So, I just really feel strongly that we need to have an objective person in this seat. And I did consider the other candidates that were running, and I did not feel that the objectivity would have been there with the other candidates. So I think we really should have options for the energy, telecommunications, transportation, and sanitation services we want. And I think we should have those options at a price we can afford. And that's why I support equal standards and equal opportunity for all of these industries and all of these energy types. I think if we encourage innovation and competition, that we're going to see performance go up, efficiency go up, and costs go down. And I think those are kind of exciting opportunities for the state of Montana. A final comment, I guess, in my opening is my 20 plus years as a business owner have given me very good insights into what sound business practices are and what they look like. So as I'm evaluating whether or not these companies that are asking for rate increase are justified in their increases or not, my business experience gives me a very good ability to look at those companies and determine if their proposals are based on sound business practices or if they're based on trying to take advantage of the customers. And I think we have to guard really hard against companies that would want to price gouge customers, but at the same time, we've got to let them do their job and function so they can be viable, healthy companies that provide these essential life services.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And let's jump over to Monica Trinnell next. Thanks for being with us. Monica was raised in eastern Montana on a ranch with her 9 siblings. She lives in Missoula with her husband and 3 daughters. Trinnell began rowing at Gonzaga University and went on to compete in 2 Olympic Games, rowing with the women's 8 in 1996 and the single scull in 2000. She won 5 World Championship rowing medals, including gold at the 1995 World Rowing Championships in Finland. Trinnell has over 2 decades of experience working directly with the Public Service Commission. She served as staff attorney for the PSC from 2001 to 2005 and worked with the Montana Consumer Council from 2014 to 2016. Tranel also worked as a law clerk at the state and federal levels and served as legislative counsel to Montana's U.S. Senator Conrad Burns. She currently runs the Tranel Law Firm, which is focused on regulatory issues before the PSC, water and property rights, and represents clients who want to invest in clean energy projects. So, Monica, up to 10 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you so much, Ray. And thank you, Susan and Shane, for a lovely overview. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if this will work. Are you all looking at my lovely campaign right now? Okay, great. So I'll just go through a quick kind of overview of who I am and why I'm running in the PSC. So Shane, you did a really good job. And one of the things that I hope you're taking is administrative agency law as a law student at the university, because that's what the Public Service Commission is. So I will, let's see if I can scroll through this. So as Ray said, I grew up in Eastern Montana with my 9 brothers and sisters. We like to call it the too much is best of all school, where we literally built snowmen using front end loaders. That's my dad down here and my brother up there in the front end loader. So the landscape of my childhood was marked with grain elevators, and these towns are 15 miles apart in Eastern Montana. If you've driven out there, you've seen them, and what these railroads are is a natural monopoly. So they were the only game in town, and they could set the rates that people had to pay to haul their grain and the wages and working conditions. So these natural monopolies that grew up in the late 1800s and early 1900s gave rise to what were generally the railroad commissions. And Shane, you did a really good job of giving us the overview of all of this. The legislature in Montana created our Railroad Commission in 1907. It became the Public Service Commission in 1913. And through that through the 1900s, there were 3 members elected statewide. And then, as you said, Shane, in the early 70s, when we rewrote our Constitution, it went to a 5-member commission elected from districts. And if anybody's curious about the history of that and what happened, I recommend talking to Maynann Ellingson, who actually gave me some lovely history and insights into why things happened in the 1970s the way they did. So here's just sort of a practical, real life. Here's what the commission is in your day-to-day life. Maybe some of you, like me, over the weekend went out and bought some pumpkins. We like to carve jack-o'-lanterns, and we did that over the weekend. So you can go to a lot of different places to buy pumpkins if you're looking to buy them, and lots of different prices. You can price shop. Almost every store has them, farmers markets, and you can find them almost everywhere right now. Also, over this weekend, maybe some of you, like we did, turned your heat on because it got kind of cold. That is a pretty different situation. If you're turning your heat on, you are only choosing to turn it up in your house, and you have no choice over who provides that to you. That's the natural monopoly. So unlike the pumpkins, where you can pay, competing prices, and there is a market for those, there is no free market for these services. They are natural monopolies. And Shane, you did a little bit of a, good overview of that. So these natural monopolies are for-profit corporations. They're in it for money. So they want to make money off of you and the basic life services like heating your house. So they are the biggest corporations in Montana and in the world. So Northwestern's biggest investor is BlackRock. And as you said, the commission in Montana is elected. It is one of 11 commissions across the country that is an elected commission. That's the minority. Most of the commissions are appointed. Some of them are elected by their legislature, but only 11 of the commissions in the United States are elected by a popular vote. And in Montana, the 5 districts are roughly equal population-wise, so pretty varied geography, And District 4 is 7 counties, about 150,000 registered voters. Lincoln County down to Ravalli, including Sanders, as you all have noted here, the counties right here. So the commission regulates the natural monopolies. So here are 5 things on here, and you can say, of these 5 things, what does a commission regulate? Milk prices, cable TV, cattle prices, the internet, or telephone numbers. It actually has oversight over the release of numbering blocks. And in the next couple of years, the incoming commission will have some oversight over the release of the 406 numbering blocks and whether or not Montana retains a single area code for the state. So one of the issues. About 100 years ago, the United States decided to get electricity to every barn, and that was the REA of 1935. So one of the things that you alluded to in the introduction is knowing what the commission is and what it's not. So it doesn't regulate co-ops, and this map overlays what areas are provided. What areas in District 4 are served by the investor-owned utility that is regulated and the rates are set by the commission, and what geographic areas are served by the co-ops. And the co-ops don't serve the population centers like Hamilton or Missoula. So the bulk of the population is served by investor-owned utilities, but the geographic area is largely served by co-ops, and they are not regulated by the commission. They are member owned, and they've done an excellent job. And a shout out to one of the City Club's sponsors, Blackfoot Communications. If you have fiber in rural Montana, you are probably served by a co-op. They've done an excellent job of serving our rural areas. And just on a note on the elected commission, Montana has not elected a Democrat to the Public Service Commission since 2008. And in that period of time, our rates have gone up 20%. So, and the commission over the last 10 years has blocked efforts by the rural co-ops to get the Universal Service Fund that is its lifeblood. So those are some of the things that have gone on over the last 10 years that have inspired me to run for this commission. So the commission, a lot of attention and energy has been focused on energy, but the commission handles a lot of dockets, and this is just anybody take a guess on how many open dockets the commission has pending before it at any one time. It's the bottom number. It's about 150 open dockets. So many of those proceedings are very technical, focused on accounting, economics, regulatory, very specific utility accounting issues that come before the commission every day. So while we pay attention to sort of the big dockets, the ones that are important are the ones that are getting filed on a day-to-day basis. So here's a slide that shows some different numbers to guess how much money comes into Montana in universal service support. So this is to support our both our rural carriers and our investor-owned utilities to roll out fiber and to serve our rural customers. It's the middle number, 120 million. CenturyLink gets about $15 million annually to serve Montana. And much of that is to serve underserved and unserved areas. The last 10 years have seen a commission that is largely unengaged and not monitoring how CenturyLink is performing and whether or not it's doing its job, and that needs to change. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing in front of the Public Service Commission in one form or another for 20 years. I was a staff attorney at the commission in the early 2000s, where I worked on some rules having to do with communications carriers phishing and putting unrequested charges on your bills. And we rewrote some rules, and for that I received the Governor's Award from Judy Martz, who I considered a friend, for excellence in service. I went on from there to work as a staff legislative counsel for Senator Burns, working on fiber issues and communications issues. My clients over the last 20 years have included ranchers across Montana. And this is one of my clients. We took a case to the Supreme Court and prevailed, facing some of the most well-funded entities in the world. I have, over the last 10 years, worked as a consumer advocate, and in that role, I have kept more than $10 million in Montana rather than going to the corporate monopoly who is in it for profit. And all that stands between you and those for-profit entities that are the biggest corporations in the world is your Public Service Commission. As you said, Ray, I'm a two-time Olympic rower, and I will tell you that during Olympic selection, my job was to make that boat go fast, and it didn't matter what side you were on. We all had to pull together to win the race, and we have enormous challenges facing our democracy right now across the board. I decided to run for this office, not because I'm a politician, not because politics were my lifelong dream, but because this is an office I know how it works. I have worked as a staff attorney at the commission. I will walk in there on day one and I will know what to do and how to do it. And I think we need excellence in our elected officials. I think we need people who will show up for the job and know how to do it and do it well.
Okay, let's jump in then, and we're going to jump into questions here in just a bit, Monica. Thank you.
Okay. Did I go past my 10 minutes?
Just a little bit. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, I will stop my screen share here.
Thanks.
And let's see. Let me jump over to my Zoom. Let's see. Sorry. Here we go.
All right.
You should be back.
We're going to go into some questions now. I'll have a few. I know some of our participants today will have some questions as well. But we want to bring Susan Patrick back to tell us how that works. Susan?
Well, thank you all, Shane, for the wonderful overview, and both of you for very articulate presentations. So Q&A is a very rich part of every City Club discussion. And, you know, unfortunately, we're not able to be there in person and find common ground with each other at the table. But please use the Q&A, not the chat, to type in your questions. Two of our board members will forward them to Ray to pose to our candidates. I know that some questions have been submitted in advance, but that's really not how we do things. We give priority to questions from today's attendees. It's often unlikely that we have the opportunity to answer all questions due to time limitations. But please remember that we are looking for questions, not position statements, but succinct civil questions. And members of the media, we're happy to connect you with our panelists after the forum and after our audience has had the opportunity to pose their questions. So with that, Ray, back to you.
All right, I'll start things off with a question for both of you, and we'll just kind of go back and forth on these questions. So we'll start with Monica, and you'll both be able to answer the same question, so no problems there. So my first question is, if you are elected to the PSC, what's the first thing you'd like to work on starting day one? Monica.
Thank you, Ray. So for me, the first thing I would like to work on day one is, and it will start on November 4th, is to meet with the staff. Over 10 years of a single party rule has resulted in a lot of noise, as you've all seen. And I think it's time that that stops, because while we are paying attention to the noise and the distraction, the commissioners have voted unanimously to raise your rates. So I will walk in the door and raise the bar simply by virtue of being there, because I bring so much experience and on-the-job knowledge. I want to restore professionalism and integrity and let the staff know that they now have commissioners who are going to act as commissioners, lead the agency, and demonstrate leadership. And that comes from competence and professionalism, which I will bring.
Jennifer.
Sorry, trying to unmute there. My plans are to actually go over and live in Helena full time for at least the first 3 to 4 months of the year while the legislature's in session. And that's going to give me an opportunity to get very familiar with all of the personnel in the agency, have those conversations with my colleagues. I do have questions for them about the things that have transpired, particularly a couple of the Supreme Court cases that have gone against them. I don't have access right now to all of the details of what went into their decisions, and I want to find out more about why they made those decisions, because from the outside they don't look very good. I also want to work with the legislature to ensure that this commission is able to function in a way that's meaningful, that produces results for the people of Montana. And there's several different ideas on the table that the Energy and Telecommunications Interim Committee has been analyzing. And I think some of that's going to come forward in terms of legislation this session. And I want to get a good firm handle on, you know, the reasons for those. I think I have a pretty good idea on some of the reasons for those, but I want to get really in tune with the debates that are occurring on both sides of those arguments. And so I do plan to attend the legislative hearings while I'm over there as well.
All right, thank you. We'll start with Jennifer this time. Jennifer, what is something that the current PSC commissioners are doing well? And what is another, on the other side of that, what are things that they might be able to be doing better?
Well, there's one or two that actually are there working regularly, and there's several that don't show up. They're not in the office. I mean, you can do a lot of the work over telecommunications, like we're holding this meeting. You know, technology is allowing a lot of that, but I think you've got to get into the office and interact with the staff. I have seen things through the legislative process. I tried to carry legislation. In fact, I did carry legislation to provide for some limited net metering expansion in Montana. And I saw some very partisanship divides in addressing that issue. And if there's one thing I could do, I would remove the politics from the debate over our energy supplies and talk to these fellow commissioners about, listen, let's do what's going to work the best for the people of Montana. Let's not take a side for one particular type of energy or against another type, but let's actually look at the science, the mathematics, the economics, the supply, the demand, the efficiency of these different power sources, and let's try to make them work for the people of Montana. Let's actually allow them to work for the people of Montana. And I think in many respects, the government does need to get out of the way and allow these different industries to compete with each other. And unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues on my side of the aisle are very pro certain specific energy types, the traditional fossil fuel energies. And on the other side of the aisle, people tend to be very pro the alternative sources. And I really think we need to forget about the politics involved in all that and look at the facts of what's working and what can work, and try to help them all function, because I think we'll be better off if we allow all of these different energy sources to come into play and be available to the people of Montana.
All right, thank you. Monica, your thoughts?
Thank you, Ray. And I will say that in terms of the question itself, what's working and what's not, very few of the commissioners are working at the commission. We had a listening session last week, and one commissioner showed up and then a second joined later. That's totally unacceptable. Over the last 10 years, it has been a single party commission, and it has just been marked by really an inability to do its job. I will note, with respect to a couple of the points that we just made, Senator Fielder talks about carrying a net metering bill that lasted for all of about a week. It didn't get out of the hearing on committee. In contrast, the Supreme Court cases that were mentioned, one of those was mine. And I argued those and prevailed at the Supreme Court on behalf of my clients. But it's 4 years into the process, and no business should have to build a 4-year litigation budget into its development. That would kill all of your members right now. So that's not acceptable. businesses need predictability, they need stability, they need to know that their commissioners are going to make decisions based on facts, science, and the law. And that's what I will do, and that's what I'll bring to this job.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the issues the PSC has been having over the last couple of years, and they've been accused of infighting and not getting along. How would you, if elected to the PSC, work together with the other 4 commissioners and bring people together to get things done? And let's start this one with Monica.
Thank you, Ray, for the question. And I think that, before you all is really a clear choice in terms of your vote. And I would ask you to look at our track records. Mine shows that I was given the award for excellence in performance by Judy Martz. I worked for Senator Burns, and I have worked across the aisle. These are not political issues. They're not partisan issues. They are deeply technical. They require a lot of knowledge about following the money, economics, accounting, and the legal framework that has to be followed. My endorsements are wide and deep, and they are from rural voters and, the Montana conservation voters. A lot of different endorsements. You can see those on my website. But specifically, I'm endorsed by Bob Brown and by Governors Schweitzer, Governor Bullock, and I will note that 2 of the primary contenders in this PSC race from both parties, Brett Rosenberg and Will Deshaw, have endorsed me. So I think that really speaks to who I am and how I will work. And I've also had broad support, including from a number of different smoke jumpers from across party lines. So we have a job to do. I am coming to this job because I want to do the work of the commission, not because I want to hold political office. And I think we need to fix things. I like to fix things. That's how I grew up in Eastern Montana, taking a job and getting it done and doing it well. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Jennifer.
Yeah, so going back to your question, you asked how we would address the some of the disputes, the personality conflicts and the drama that we've seen unfold at the Public Service Commission, and I will address that directly. Number one, I don't think that you're going to be able to have a good working relationship with people if you campaign on the fact that the commission is broken and they're all lazy and you're the only one that's going to come in and save it. You're not going to have a good relationship with those colleagues if you get in and that's what you've campaigned on. So I've actually stayed out of the personality conflict issue. I've stayed out of the drama. I haven't even spent my time on it. It's irrelevant. There's a job that needs to be done, and I'm very focused on doing the job and doing the work and being professional about it. So that's where I fall in terms of the personality conflicts. As far as one of my former competitors from the primary election making an endorsement for Ms. Trinnell, I beat him. I beat him and he didn't like it. It was someone in my own party and he's bitter about it. And I feel kind of bad for him. I'm sure it hurts. Nobody likes to get beat, but I'm not going to hold it against him. He's free to do whatever he wants. And it's just kind of the way it is. I let those kind of things roll off. I never make a decision based on a personal feeling about a person, and I didn't do that in the legislature either. And I saw a lot of that play out in the legislature where people would vote for or against a bill whether based on whether they like the person or not. I don't vote for or against things based on whether I like someone or not, or based on which side of the aisle the idea came from. I try to make independent, objective analysis of each decision that I have to make and try to make the best decision that I can. Because I know that politics are just so minuscule compared to what we really ought to be doing. We ought to be doing what's best for our fellow citizens, for the people of Montana, for present and future generations. And those personality conflicts and drama, I don't have any room in it. I don't have any bandwidth for it. I don't want to be involved in it. I don't even want to know who said what.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we'll run to one of our questions from that was just sent in. So the question is, there are places in Missoula County where Northwestern Energy, and Missoula Co-op lines both run. Since one of those is normally cheaper than the other, why can't people choose where to purchase their power on their own? We'll start with Jennifer on that one.
Oh, I think they should be able to. I mean, I'd like to see more options available to everybody. And, you know, that's a bit of a threat to the large companies and big monopolies. But when you allow free market principles to work, you know, and there actually is competition, that actually is what gets people off the dime, or get companies off the dime and get them performing better. So the idea of being able to have different options for your essential life services, I think, is going to be beneficial not only to the consumers, but also in the long run to the companies. Because, you know, when a company gets too big and too powerful, sooner or later, it's going to be the focus of attack. And, you know, that the attack will mount in such a huge way that that company might not be able to sustain it and survive it. So I think we've got to let freedom ring, and at the extent that we can. The regulation is important because, you know, when there is no market competition, somebody's got to, you know, do the checks on these companies to make sure that they're not taking unfair advantage of that position. And I think they do, you know, for the most part, they do a pretty good job. But allowing people to have options for what services they want to purchase, whether it's Uber or Lyft or a taxi or what energy company they're using, I think that can be very beneficial.
Monica, your thoughts?
Thank you, Ray. So that fundamentally demonstrates a lack of understanding of what the regulatory paradigm is. So the reason that we have a commission is to regulate these natural monopolies, the railroad line coming across eastern Montana, the electricity line coming to your house. There's only one of those. And we're not going to allow Northwestern, the electric co-op, MDU, several different providers deliver electricity across one line. That's just not the way it works. And it doesn't make sense to have 2 or 10 lines coming to your house. So the specific question about why you have either Missoula Electric Co-op or Northwestern and why you choose one or the other in the footprint of those co-ops versus the investor-owned utility. So, you know, that grew up over time. So in 1935, we passed the Electrification of America. That led to co-ops, and investor-owned utilities served largely the populated portions of America and Montana. So we have, by law, the Territorial Services Integrity Act, and that governs who serves where. And if you had like a new business, for example, were to come to a place that had previously never been served, who serves it is a function of certain statutory criteria. So you go through the process to determine how that is, how that works out. So this is all set by statute, and you know, it's fundamental to remember the commission is a creature of statute. It's an administrative agency. It can't rewrite its laws. So what it does is it you know, implements the statutes that controls how it works. And so, you know, going down Main Street or whatever, you know, on one side it might be a co-op and another it might be Northwestern Energy, and there are probably some really good stories about why, you know, 123 Main is served by the co-op and 124 Main is served by Northwestern. This, in some cases, it's just sort of a historic, you know, it's how it happened, and the footprint grew up over time. In general, it was population, you know, urban versus rural. And that is, it's controlled by statute, it's set by statute, and the PSC implements that. And that's how that works. And that's what the regulatory process is. So that's, you know, something that the commission just implements. If you want that to be changed, that would be a legislative mandate.
Thanks, Monica. And we'll start this next question with you. There have been critics who have said the PSC is too close to the Northwestern Energy Company. What are your feelings about the relationship between the PSC and Northwestern Energy? Monica?
I have no knowledge about the current commissioner's relationships with Northwestern Energy, so I can't speak to the specifics of those relationships. I will say that on a going forward basis, everybody needs predictability, including Northwestern. Everybody does better when they have excellence in their elected officials. everyone gains when we have people who know what they're doing and how to do it. So we need commissioners who will follow the law, who will follow science, facts, and the law, and follow it regularly. I mean, nobody can do business if they don't know if on Tuesday they're going to, the rules are going to be X, and on Thursday they're going to be Y. That doesn't serve anybody. And it just, we can't have a commission that, says, oh, your application is not adequate, go back and redo it. And then a few weeks later, without any change, says, it's fine. That is totally unacceptable for any kind of investor. We need to know what the rules are. We need to know that they will be applied fairly. And, the monopolies that are regulated by the commission are most invested in having them work well, having the commissioners work well, and maintaining transparent, open relationships where they know we're going to follow the law and we know what the law is. And we're going to require you to abide by the statutory mandate to provide adequate service at just and reasonable rates. We will implement that, and you are going to be held to those rules. Everybody does better in that environment. From my 4-year-old to the biggest corporation in Montana, we need to know what the rules are. We need to know that we're going to be held accountable to them. And I will do that as your commissioner. Thank you.
Jennifer, your comments?
So the question, if you would repeat the question, I think that would be good.
Sure. There are critics who say that the PSC is a bit too cozy with Northwestern Energy. What are your thoughts on the relationship, of how the relationship should be between Northwestern Energy and the PSC?
Thank you. I agree with Monica on that. I don't know what their relationships are personally, but I do know that what I've decided to do is not to take any private meetings with any industry or any special interest that will be coming before the Public Service Commission. So I have not done that. I have not accepted any campaign contributions from any of them. I have not accepted any endorsements from any of them. They're not involved in my campaign. I think it's very, very important to maintain independence, to maintain objectivity, and to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So, I'm not sure what my colleagues are doing, but I do know what my opponent's doing, and I do know what I will do, and they are very different. I won't be engaged with these folks in terms of being close with them, being entangled with them, accepting finances from them, or being influenced by them unduly.
All right, let's move over to green energy. What are your thoughts, Jennifer, on green energy and the future of green energy in Montana?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's called green energy because it's actually not as green as you might think. I mean, we just learned there's a little tour up at the mine that's been trying to get open here for 33 years up in my part of the state. And there's a silver and copper deposit. And these mining companies have been going through the process of trying to obtain permits for 33 years now. And the average wind machine requires 5 tons of copper. But yet the folks that are advocating, purely advocating green energy are also advocating keep it in the ground and not allow any mining. So I think that there's a real kind of a sad state of affairs in the debate over green versus traditional energy because all of them have pros and all of them have cons, and we need to be realistic about what they are. As far as leading forward into expanding alternative energy in our state, I do think we need to do that. I think that would be helpful for us to do, but we need to be realistic about how we do it. I don't think it would be a good idea to follow some of the models that, blindly follow these models with a zealousness for wind or solar that end up causing some of the problems that we're seeing with power shortages in the places that have gone 100% to those types of sources. So we've got to be realistic about it and make sure that people can have the power that they need and want when they need it, when they want it at a price they can afford. And I believe green energy can play an important role in that. But we shouldn't, as I said earlier, we shouldn't really weaponize the government just to do away with the existing sources that are working well, with this idea that we're going to instantly replace them with these other sources that quite aren't performing up to par yet.
Thank you. Monica, your thoughts?
So thank you. And first, I want to tell a little anecdote. So in the early 1800s, we delivered goods by barge through canals. And the steam engine came along and made those canals obsolete. What did the canal operators do? They built more canals. They doubled down on their technology and insisted, because their profits demanded it, that they were going to continue doing a technology that had gone away. It was obsolete. That's where we stand today. The energy transition is underway. It's happening across the world. This is an incredibly exciting time for everyone. And all of us in Montana should be demanding that we stand at the lead of this transition, because we have the resources to do it. Take Montana's wind resource. It's excellent, not because it blows hard, which is a trope. And if you're from Eastern Montana like I am, you know it does blow hard. It's consistent and it's winter peaking. So you take that and our incredible geographic disparity and what we have available to us. Western Montana has been served almost exclusively by hydro for well over 100 years. We have the resources, the ability, and we are deploying this now at a commercial level that is absolutely fascinating. This is a time, we stand now, today, at a time of moral imperative and market opportunity. And Montana should lead that transition. We don't have time to be wringing our hands over whether or not we are going to extract more profits from coal. That has passed. We've crossed the Rubicon on that. We're talking about where our future leads. And let's have that conversation, because we're able to do it. Physically, we're able to do it. The economics are there. The commission now is pricing wind at $21 a megawatt hour. We're paying over $70 a megawatt hour for Colstrip. The economics are not only there, they make sense to move in the direction of renewable resources. So let's do it. The only thing stopping it is politics. And that is unacceptable, and that has to change, and I will change it. I will work to change it.
Well, we have a couple more questions that have come in, and we'll start with Monica on this one. How will you prevent externalizing costs, such as the future repair of pollution damages and carbon and methane emissions, so that energy companies can factor that into their proposals?
This is an excellent question, and if I'm following the chat correctly, I think this came in from Sue Kirchmeyer. So thank you for the question. And so one of the issues here is the statute, the pre-approval statute that was adopted in 2003 by the Montana legislature. Prior to that, the utility always invested in the resources that it thought it needed, and then it would come to the commission after the fact and ask for approval of those resources. So the initial risk was all on the utility. The pre-approval statute in 2003 flip-flopped that. And since then, Northwestern has used the pre-approval statute exclusively to bring resources into its resource stack. And what that does, it requires us to carry all of the risk. So the specific question of how do you avoid externalizing costs onto the ratepayers is to have the utility acquire its resources and take the risk on upfront. There is nothing stopping Northwestern from buying all of Colstrip if it wants to. If it thinks that's a good deal, it can do that right now. It can close on that deal today. The only reason it doesn't want to do that is because it wants us, the ratepayers, to function as its default insurer for all of the liability that that plant has. In 2014, when they bought the hydros, they valued the hydros alone at $740 million. They valued the hydros plus Colstrip at $400 million. That's a $340 million difference, negative, attributable to Colstrip. And in 6 years, that plant has only gotten older. So why are they now saying it's worth $1 as they were in the 2019 legislature? What is happening to those liabilities? They are shifting them all onto us, and they are not telling us what they are. So job number one is to say, you, the utility, you take on the risks of your resource acquisition. And if they prove to be prudent, then cost recovery is something the commission will look at down the road. I think the pre-approval statute has been a very dangerous statute, the commission has not done a good job of monitoring and overseeing. So that's a very significant step that the commission can do. There are other things that I think the commission can do within the statutory mandate that it has, but I think basically what we need to talk about is where is the money trail and where are the risks? And I would look at those very carefully.
Thank you, Monica. Jennifer, your thoughts?
Thank you. Could you please repeat the question? There was a lot of content there between the time you asked and now. So
Sure. How will you prevent externalizing costs such as the future repair of pollution damages in carbon and methane emissions so that energy companies can factor that into their proposals?
Boy, that's a pretty deep question. You know, the statutes have to be followed. So the legislature is going to be setting statutes that drive a lot of these things, and then we have to follow them as a commission. But some of the political arguments I've already heard at the legislature over these things, externalizing costs like this, projecting costs by modeling. Oftentimes the modeling isn't accurate. In fact, most of the time we're seeing models that just don't produce the results. If you look at what was modeled back in the 70s, you know, we were supposed to go through this horrible ice age, and that didn't happen. And global warming models predicted that, you know, the oceans would be boiling, and that didn't happen. And so modeling is not something I put a lot of stock in. You have to look at the true science, and science, in order to prove out, has to be proven where it's 100% true, not by consensus, but 100% proven by repeatable observations. Where I'm going with this is that I think we need to be really careful about being kind of jumping on a bandwagon, agreeing that, oh my God, the sky is falling and we've got to all do this, based on somebody else's opinion, based on somebody else's trust in somebody who may or may not have done adequate work. We're seeing some scientists with contradictory conclusions about some of these debates, and the minority are being shouted down, and the majority, some of the ones that were in the majority are actually saying, I was mistaken to be in the majority. I'm leaving the majority consensus because I've now seen that the process wasn't transparent, the modeling wasn't very good, the people that made the decisions weren't necessarily true experts in the field. But going to some of the impacts, just in the last 50 years, in the United States, our gross domestic product has increased by 300%, and the vehicle miles traveled in our United States has increased by 200%. The population has increased by 60%. Energy consumption has increased by 50%. Yet the aggregate emissions from 6 common pollutants has dropped by 74%. So a lot of folks think that it's worse than it is, but when you actually look at the data, at the actual data from what has transpired, some of the sky is falling modeling and projections just haven't panned out. We've done a good job. Some of it has been regulatory, but a lot of it has also been because the industries don't want to create waste. Waste is expensive. Waste costs money. So it behooves the industries to actually be more efficient with their production, and that helps cut pollutions as well. So I think that's a very big question. We could probably talk about it for a very long time. The debate could be centered on that. We could go on for hours. But in a nutshell, that's kind of an overview of what I would say about that question without spending a whole lot more time on it.
Thanks, Jennifer. We'll start with you on this next question that comes from Richard Smith, and the question is, because the vast majority of Montana's electricity and gas are supplied by a powerful monopoly, Northwestern Energy, most consumers do not have a choice for where their energy comes from. Consumers will depend on you, if elected to the PSC, for reducing climate-related risk to Montana's and the Earth's environment. How would you, as a policymaker, act to accelerate climate change mitigation?
Yeah, good question. I think part of that last answer covered it a little bit. You know, this came up a little bit earlier, and having options for energy are important. That's very important. So we shouldn't just rely on one or another. It's just kind of like forest land that I own. My husband and I take care of our land, and we don't want a monoculture of one type of tree, even though there's one type of tree that's probably more valuable than the others. We want to manage it for a healthy environment. So we have a diversity of different trees, different ages, heights, ranges. We cull out the sick, and we try to make sure that we have a healthy forest. I think that same principle can apply to energy. We've got to allow different types of energy to compete. I went against the grain of my party in working to carry that net metering legislation, which, by the way, took longer than 1 week. When you write a piece of legislation, there's oftentimes weeks, maybe months that go into it. There's an awful lot of work that goes into it, to the point where you actually get it introduced and get a hearing, and a lot of work that goes into actually trying to convince your peers and your colleagues that, you know, they should pass the bill. And then after the bill dies, even trying to revive the bill throughout the session before the final bell is rung. So much like a court case, there's a lot that goes on besides your actual courtroom time. I did spend quite a bit of time and effort trying to allow the expansion of net metering, so that people could have the option to have more than one meter on their property, so that they could have alternative energy. They could have wind, they could have solar, they could have their own little small hydro plant, and they could connect another meter to it out at the barn, or a small business, or even some of the industries wanted to do this. Some of the public institutions wanted to be able to do it. And there was a hardline stand from Northwestern Energy that they had a zero tolerance policy against any net metering at all. And I found that to be unreasonable. I think there's room for it all. I think that Northwestern Energy has a public nexus, because they are using public waterways to generate electricity. They're using public right-of-ways to run the power lines. So it's not just a purely private company. There is a public nexus. But I did not agree with the hardliners on the green energy side, who were demanding that Northwestern would buy back this power from the small individual producers at retail costs, and then sell it at retail costs without being able to make some kind of a commission on it. That was wrong too. So I think there's some middle ground to be had in these things. I think that's one of the things that makes me different than my opponent, and also most of the other commissioners that are on there. I am looking for that middle ground that will work for the people of Montana, and I'm open to all of it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Monica, your thoughts?
Thanks, Ray. So, and thank you, Richard, for your question. And this does actually tie back to Sue's question a little bit. And essentially, I'll just say that the end of the question was climate change mitigation. I think you're asking about how do we decarbonize the power sector, which is where the commission exists. So when we look at decarbonizing all of our energy resources, we roughly have in thirds building and, sort of the building area, transportation, which is easy in some ways and hard in others, and then the power generation sector, which is where the commission resides. And this is about a third of our electric generation portfolio and resources. So what can the commission do to address climate change issues and mitigate the damage that is happening? So number one, and first and most importantly, is to stop denying that it's happening. That's just not the starting point. The starting point is we have a problem, we can fix it, and we have solutions that we can implement. How do we go about figuring out how to implement the solutions and the resources that we have? Two very concrete ways in Montana that I would look at: distributed energy resources like solar rooftop, energy production at the site or on the roof of your home. I mean, that reduces demand, and that is just an easy, low-hanging fruit way to start. And then the other thing does relate back to what Sue was asking about, is how do we, externalize the costs of fossil fuel resources? So correctly pricing the resources that we have. And that was some of the, litigation that I did and handled, was to challenge the commission's refusal to apply the same carbon pricing methodology to renewable energy resources that they were giving to Northwestern for its resource stack. So I think, correctly pricing the energy that's coming before it to address all of the impacts that those resources will have, and also allowing people to produce energy at their homes, at their businesses, and in that way defray and use renewable resources and defray some of the dependence on the fossil fuel plants that we need to phase out.
All right, thanks, Monica. We'll start with you on this next question. Let's see, this one comes from John Thorson, and John asks, what should the Montana Public Service Commission learn from the San Bruno natural gas explosion? We've also had natural gas explosions in Montana, in Bozeman. What should we be learning? What should the commission learn from those explosions, Monica?
Yeah, so the commission's oversight of pipelines is pretty limited and has been largely preempted by federal statute and rule. The commission does have 3 engineers on staff who do oversee safety and look at pipeline safety and railroad safety. And so, taking those engineers' reports seriously, understanding, what they're doing, and funding them where they need more resources to ensure that we do have safe pipelines intrastate is really important. Other things, though, that I think that the commission can do when they look at the utility as a whole and look at some of its safety compliance, when we look at coming into Missoula, along the Clark Fork River, so is the utility maintaining tree trimming? And that is actually a very serious issue because that has caused a lot of the fires. And Northwestern needs to be held accountable for making sure that it's doing its job. And that's what the commission needs to be doing. So using the resources that the commission has on staff, operating within the legal framework that it has available to it, I think just oversight, monitoring, reporting, and understanding what questions to ask, who to ask the questions of, and what to do with the information when you have it, which is something I'm uniquely suited to doing as an attorney and having direct experience in this area.
Jennifer, your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, speaking of direct experience, mine actually comes from boots on the ground, having managed projects, having an understanding and having led construction operations and compliance on the ground. So I'm very, very interested in meeting with the inspectors and going through their protocols, ensuring that they are doing their job very diligently. I actually want to go out on the ground with them and look at how they're inspecting these facilities. Coming with a construction background, I understand proper construction techniques and how essential they are, particularly when you have buried utility lines, any kind of utility line really, but pipelines are particularly interesting because they come through our communities, and oftentimes people don't know they're there because they're underground. But right where I'm sitting right now in my home office, there's a pipeline that crosses the Clark Fork River overhead. It's an overhead span, and at undergrounds I can see the tower right about 1,000 feet from me. It undergrounds on the property right below ours. And I've worked around those pipelines on different projects. I understand how careful you need to be. And I also understand when they're being installed, how important it is to bed those pipes properly, to seal those joints properly, to compact the soil properly around them so you don't get settling, and have immediate emergency preparedness protocols in place to shut them down if there is a detected leak. And you've got to be able to do the monitoring correctly to be able to detect those things before they become a major problem. There's about 3 million miles of pipelines in America right now, and they are essential. They carry essential, affordable energy supplies throughout our country. But ensuring that they are safe is critical. It's one of the top priorities for me. I'm not as interested in arguing over climate change and arguing over what type of energy the government should allow and shouldn't allow, as I am about making sure that what we have works, that it's safe, that our communities are kept safe, and that we've got systems in place to make sure that these things continue to provide good services to the people of Montana over the long haul. And I think my boots on the ground construction, maintenance, operations, engineering experience goes a lot further in that regard than any courtroom experience ever could.
We're starting to run out of time. We want to leave enough time for your closing statements, but just one thing about broadband in Montana. We have another question that came in. Montana is one state that does, one of very few states that does not have a state broadband coordinator. Would you support developing this position in Montana, and would you support the development and publication of a state broadband map? Jennifer, let's start with you.
I'd have to take a good look at it. Broadband is super important. It's being built out now pretty aggressively in rural communities. It's bringing services that are vital. People didn't realize we needed it so bad. It kind of reminds me of the days when you look back in our history of when electricity first started being strung up and carried out to the rural areas. It took extra effort to be able to get it there because the customer base wasn't big enough to pay for it. And we're seeing those kind of efforts with broadband happening now. So I do support the expansion of broadband. I think that it's, it provides an important service to in a lot of different ways. They're vital, and also some for, just keeping in touch and recreational purposes as well. So whether or not we need to add a new person or a new division, I'd have to take a good look at to see if that would actually be an effective use of public funding.
Thanks, Jennifer. Monica, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Ray. So I think this has very real implications for some of our rural co-ops who are deploying broadband across the state. And in terms of a map, that has implications for trademark protections. And, the commission has, I think, over the last 10 years of an all-Republican commission, has not done a good job of listening to and helping the rural co-ops where they are doing a good job and saying, how can we support what you're doing and do it better? So in terms of a broadband map, I think that's, a function of what's, there is a lot of information that's out there right now. I certainly wouldn't support anything that would compromise, sort of the business plans of our rural co-ops and, put them in a position where they have to be seeking protective orders from the commission and going through that whole process. But I think it's a question of listening, learning, helping, and then leading where you can. When I was a staff attorney at the commission, we used to write support letters to the FCC on behalf of our rural co-ops. And I think that there are things that the commission can do to assist the co-ops. So, I think the first place to start is, what do you all need from your commission, and how can we be helpful to you in doing a job that you're obviously working very hard to do, and how can we facilitate that? If these are two very specific things that the rural co-ops think would be useful, then I would be supportive of it. If they already exist in ways that they're not necessary and they're redundant, then I think we leave it there.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate your answers to the questions today, and we're going to jump into our final statements, if you will. So let's start with Monica, if you would go, and we'll go up to 3 minutes each, and we'll try to get done by the top of the hour. So go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, thank you so much. So thank you all for being here. Your presence, and there are over 70 participants, says to me that you care deeply about this agency. It's one of the smallest agencies in Montana. It regulates the biggest corporations. In the 1880s, in the Atlantic Monthly, an article was written, "How we take care of our monopolies speaks to how we are as a democratic society." I decided to run for this position because as an attorney practicing in front of the commission, I saw the need for systemic change. I was trying to bring $100 million of new money, new investment to rural Montana. And we were not getting that because the commissioners are saying things like wind turbines fly off and kill people. Montana needs to know that we're losing these kinds of real investment dollars in Montana because the commission has been so dysfunctional. I decided to step up and run for this at this point in our history, in our time, because our democratic institutions need to hold. And they need to hold because the center is not something that is just going to work. We have to build it. We have to work hard to build it together. And, make no mistake about it. The corporations that the commission regulates are about money. That's what they do. That's not wrong, but there's no market. There is nothing to regulate them other than the commission. And the commission has to be people who know how that job works. They know how to do it, and they will stand up to these regulated for-profit corporations. I have a track record of doing that. You have a real choice in this race. You have the choice between experience, knowledge, and professionalism. And I grew up in Eastern Montana, and I come from a place where we weren't about politics. We were about getting the job done. We were about fixing things. We were about working together. That's the Montana that I love. That's the Montana that I found and discovered and saw in Western Montana when I rode my bike from the Canadian border all the way through District 4, 550 miles to the Idaho border at the southern end of Ravalli County. We have a beautiful state, and we have tremendous resources. I have 3 daughters. I'm all in. I'm deeply, deeply invested in the Montana I grew up in giving my children the democracy and the Montana that I love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I would appreciate your support and your vote.
Thanks, Monica. Jennifer, your closing statement, please.
Well, thanks very much for having the forum and hosting us both. I really appreciate that. I'm sure your listeners hopefully learned a little bit too. I am going to fight for low-cost energy, safe communities, a healthy environment, and a strong economy. I'm not going to put any of those things at risk. They are all equally important. I'm a principled person. Unlike my opponent, I have not accepted campaign contributions from any business groups or any special interest groups that lobby the Public Service Commission. I don't have a good old boys relationship with anyone in the industry. I'm coming in fresh. In fact, I'm so independent that the Missoulian itself had called me fiercely independent thinker. I'm experienced. I've got 8 years as a lawmaker. I've got 8 years representing people and working directly with people on issues in Western Montana and bringing those issues to the forefront of government on their behalf. And I've got over 2 decades of boots on the ground experience with the engineering, with the compliance, with the licensing, with the construction, with the management, the maintenance, the financing, the permitting, all of these things that affect and are part of how these regulated entities actually operate. I understand sound business practices. I understand the importance of being able to be successful in business and what that takes. There's an awful lot of regulatory red tape out there that makes it very hard for businesses to be able to thrive. So I don't want to put any undue burdens on businesses, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm watching out for the people that I represent. That's the public of Western Montana, to make sure that we're making good decisions on their behalf. And that means yes, regulating where it's necessary, but not regulating any of these viable providers out of existence, as some people would like to do. I'm a giver, I'm not a taker. I believe public servants should give more than they take. I did not enter politics for the paycheck, and that's why I have donated half of my legislative salary, pledged half of that to give back to charity. I want people to know I never got involved with this for the money, and I'm still not involved in it for the money. I was asked to do this because we need good people that will represent the citizens here and look out for our best interests. I am a true public servant. I'm an award-winning defender of the rights and freedoms of the people and our outdoor heritage. The Missoulian had made an endorsement of me on Sunday, October 11th, and they interviewed us both. And they felt that we were both strong candidates, and that we both have demonstrated a commitment to acting in the best interests of Montana consumers and a willingness to stand up to powerful interests. But, they said, Fielder has the edge due to her unique capacity to unite a fractured commission. Her fellow Republicans will respect her as a fiercely independent thinker and a no-nonsense leader. She is the breath of fresh air the commission so badly needs right now. Those are the words from the Missoulian after they considered both of us. They gave me the edge in this race. I appreciate that. There's been some developments that have happened since then that I'd love to talk about, but we don't have time. But I will say that the Missoulian did get it right with that original endorsement, and I think that I will prove them right should I be elected to this position. I thank you guys for your support, and I thank you for your help. And whether you are supporting me in this election or not, I will be working with you and open to your ideas as I go forward as hopefully Western Montana's next public service commissioner. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer Fielder. Thanks, Monica Trinnell. Thank you all for participating in today's City Club Missoula. It's now up to you and the other voters in District 4, so get out and vote.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Shane. Just a word about Shane. I think it's awesome that we were able to showcase one of our young, talented grad students, and really appreciate you skipping class for this, Shane. Thank you, Jennifer and Monica. And again, another masterful job. Really appreciate it. Thank you to our sponsors, especially University of Montana, Blackfoot, and First Security Bank. Please join us on November 9 for a City Club Zoom, a post-election wrap-up featuring, among others, Sally Mock, Senior News Analyst and News Director Emeritus of MTPR and host of MTPR's weekly campaign beat, and Robert Saldin, Political Science Professor and also a campaign beat stalwart, and we'll have at least one other panelist there too, but we really appreciate your collective commitment to civil discourse. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Alex, behind the scenes, and we'll look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you, Senator Fielder. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Susan. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.